Hello, loves, and welcome back to the LCMHC Mystic Musings. If you're new to this corner and space and time, I am your host, Christine Free. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, energy conduit, hypnotherapist, Jungian shamanic practitioner, yoga instructor, mystic mother, and a lifelong seeker of the alchemy between psychology and spirituality. This podcast is meant to exist as a sacred corner of the world where mind and mystery sit together, where what I once would say healing, I will now say where nurturing becomes multidimensional, and where your inner world is honored as deeply as your outer one. So my hope is that each time you listen, you find yourself feeling more seen, more connected, and gently reminded that you are everything and nothing less. So today we are diving into dissociative identity disorder, often called DID. So this is not going to be a sensational episode, like we're not sensationalizing DID, and this is not a fear-based episode. This is all about truth-telling. And if you've ever wondered about DID and what it actually is, beyond movies and headlines, and really the misinformation, and if you live with dissociation, trauma, or fractured parts of self, or even if you're just needing some reassurance that the mind doesn't actually break, that we adapt, like our brains are amazing, then this episode is really for you. And I'm so excited, so let's begin. Okay, so since we're going to be diving into some clinical aspects of this podcast might be just a little bit longer than our normal. I will try to keep it minimal, but let's start with talking about what DID is and isn't. Dissociative identity disorder is actually one of the most stigmatized, truly misunderstood diagnoses in the mental health world. And what it includes is 2 or more distinct identity states, disruptions in memory, consciousness, sense of self, symptoms that cause distress or impairment, and most importantly, a history of chronic, overwhelming trauma during early childhood. What DID is not, it does not come from fantasy, it is not a weakness, and is not attention seeking. It forms when a child's nervous system is literally forced to solve impossible problems, i.e., how do I survive something I cannot escape? And the answer that the psyche will give is that we don't collapse. It's all hinges on organization and reorganization. So divide and conquer. We will divide the load so survival can continue. So DID is actually not fragmentation, though I'm sure some other clinicians and other people in the world might disagree with me with that, and that's absolutely fine. Totally respect that. But I do not believe that DID is a fragmentation. I think it's an adaptation under extreme conditions, i.e., trauma. So something for us to understand DID better is we also have to understand dissociation. And dissociation is something that we all do. It is a human spectrum, okay? So when you're daydreaming, when you're driving, you have highway hypnosis, zoning out, getting lost in your book, those are all normal dissociative experiences. So we all do it, okay? But when trauma happens, and it's chronic trauma, and it's relational, so within your families, all of that, and when it occurs before a child's sense of self is fully formed, so that's that 0 to 7 age group, which if you've listened to my other podcasts in the past, I absolutely talk about that. And so when that happens, so when there's chronic trauma and it's occurring in that 0 to 7 time, it makes it so the child can't fully form in that sense of self. And that's where dissociation, it becomes structural. So instead of momentary detachment, which is what we all do, completely normal, what the psyche does, which is phenomenal, it's like, it's like a double-edged sword here. Like the fact that the psyche knows how to do this is absolutely phenomenal, but the fact that it has to do it is sad. But so the psyche does is it creates distinct internal roles, and that they hold emotions, memories, functions, and they do that because they have to delegate and send it off to other places because it was too much for one system alone. And that is not pathology. Again, that's adaptation. And that's a word you're going to probably hear me say a lot, is adaptation. And adaptation saves lives. So dissociation does not make you have DID. I want to point that out. It absolutely exists along a continuum. So kind of building off some of the stuff from my other podcasts, you have social masks. So those are the roles we adopt to survive in an environment. We have retainers and scaffolding, which is the internal structures that hold identity together under stress. Ego states are parts, different internal roles, structural dissociation, where we organize separation of experience. And then you get lower. So it's like you go from social masks to retainers and scaffolding, ego states, structural dissociation, and when it's more intense, DID, the most complex expression of the survival system. Nothing's snapping or breaking. It is literally a system evolving to meet the level of the threat. So like I said, chronic trauma, the level of threat. Now, if you listen to my episode on masks as retainers and scaffolding, this kind of may already feel a little familiar, where masks help us navigate the world and dissociation helps us survive what could not be navigated at all. So DID, though, is a separate conversation. It is the deepest end of a same pool. Now, let's talk a little neuroscience here. So the brain with DID. And I'm going to be really, I'll make it brief, okay? So one of the most important things to understand about DID is that DID, again, it's not psychological. It is neurobiological. And again, I'm sure people will argue with me, perfectly fine. Do not, cite me as, factual. You don't have to. Fine. But yeah, I'm going to say DID is not only psychological, it is neurobiological. Okay, so brain imaging, we will see with MRIs and cortex supports reasoning, impulse control, self-reflection. So in DID, these systems don't communicate in a single linear way. And for all my neurodivergents, you can absolutely attest to understanding how thinking linearly is just not on our forefront. So I would safely argue, and though I do not have the facts to back it up, I would safely argue that individuals who identify or, will state, oh, I have DID, we've got some neurodivergency there, which is fine, beautiful. But just some food for thought with that one. So instead, we have the brain organizing experience by state, not by timeline. And this is why someone may cognitively know something in one moment, but then have no emotional or bodily access to it in another. And these differences are observable, they are measurable, and they are replicated across studies. So that's not imagined. So when we say the mind does not break, it adapts, that's not poetry, though it actually is, but it is neuroscience. And this is why International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation recognizes DID as a trauma-based developmental condition. So not a disorder of the imagination. So if you didn't know that, now you do. All right. So I want to talk some history here. So history misrepresentation, and I'm going to use a case study. Given the fact that DID has a complicated history, early clinicians like Pierre Janet understood dissociation as structural, but later media portrays it as I can't ever say that dang word. Man, if I don't have a tongue tie, I don't know what my mouth is doing. Anyway, the media portrays it as like some exaggerated situation where people have these split personalities and they're, if you've ever watched the movie Sybil, right? So movies and books can turn DID into violence, chaos, and horror, which erases the actual truth. DID is all about protection, not danger. And modern trauma research has brought us back to that reality. And clinicians who work with internal family systems, IFS, which I definitely bring up often, and I need to backtrack. Let me say something real quick here. Having parts, so with internal family system, it's parts work. Having parts does not equal DID. We all have parts. That's being human. But what distinguishes DID is the degree of separation between those parts. So if I could bold my words, degree of separation would be what I'd bold. And in DID, parts may be neurologically separated from memory or emotions and the bodily awareness. And the level of separation forms only when a child's nervous system must literally survive the most overwhelming, inescapable, and relational trauma before integration is possible. And that, saying that, for me, when I say that, because of the work that I do and the most amazing individuals that I work with, when I say that statement, I have to pause because it makes me a little overwhelmed and it makes me want to cry, because the idea that a child had to overcome literally inescapable relational trauma before their nervous system could actually integrate and whatnot. And they had to create this system of survival. So delegate it, send it off to these different parts. That the degree of separation, for me, that sits with me so deeply. I literally, if I could hug my clients in the most depth soul way, I would, because that's a big statement. So before I go off on tangents here, I'm going to come back. I'm going to reel myself back in. So I want you to think of the psyche like a house being built in childhood. And in safe environments, rooms connect naturally. However, in the unsafe environments, walls go up early, and not as decoration, but as fire breaks. And DID isn't about having all these rooms. It's about how many doors had to be sealed to stop the fire from spreading. Now the case study. This is a lived experience. And we're going to call this case study M. M is a woman in her late 30s, initially sought therapy for anxiety, emotional numbness, memory gaps, lifelong sense of not knowing who she was. She was highly functioning. She was employed, insightful, deeply empathetic, and no one suspected DID. And this matters because DID rarely presents as chaos. It honestly presents as competence. So M grew up with chronic emotional neglect and inconsistent caregiving before age 6, along with other traumas. There was no single worse event, only inescapable relational overwhelm. And when a child cannot flee, they can't fight or receive comfort, the nurture that they deserve, the nervous system chooses a fourth option. Divide experiences so survival can continue. Now, over time, therapy revealed an organized internal system, not fragmentation. There are material parts, a child part holding terror, a protector, caregiver, and all of these parts carry intelligence. That's a word to also hang on to, intelligence. And dissociation showed up subtly. So time feeling fuzzy, journaling shifts in tone, emotional reactions that didn't match the moment. And the system learned to remain unseen because visibility once meant danger. DID did not harm M. It protected her. So DID is more of an intelligent form of protection within the psyche. And so her suffering, though, came later when the adaptations outlived the danger. So when she grew up and she was able to physically overcome and get out of those situations and work through the other stuff, all of a sudden that system that she had in place, the DID that she had in place, it was running amok. And so something with this we want to look at when we focus nurturing the self and nurturing the individual on stabilization, regulation, communication, and respect, not forcing or merging or rushing timelines, healing happens in such a more cohesive way. And so that healing will then look like integration of experience and not loss of identity. So in the healing of DID, and if you listen to my last podcast when I talked about how healing is intrinsic, it's always happening. So when an individual nurtures the DID symptoms, we're not erasing parts. We're not forcing integration. We're not fixing someone because nothing is broken, right? It's about helping the healing aspect become one and becoming safe. So it's more or less like you're not, coming back and you're just like one. It means that you are bringing those parts together as one so they can all cohabitate in a safe environment. So nurturing looks like safety. It looks like communication between parts. There's a reduction to elimination of shame. There's increased cooperation. There's choice. And there's nervous system regulation. And many people live really well functional multiplicity, so a cooperative internal system rather than just a single fused identity. So the goal is not sameness, it's about harmony. And harmony is built through the body, right? So we're not going to shame an individual that has these parts that literally saved them throughout their life. So that degree of separation, these parts, like they divided and conquered and they came together to protect and save that individual. We're not trying to be like, oh, like, let me more. No. Harmony. We're harmonizing. Okay. So DID lives in the nervous system. It lives in breath. It lives in posture, tension. You can see it in numbness, startled responses, which is why the healing process of this, again, healing is happening all the time. So in order to help nurture that healing more, we cannot just rely on talk therapy. Trauma-informed and trauma-certified somatic modalities actually support nurturing the healing of this by restoring choice, rhythm, and safety to the body. Now, from a mystical lens, and I'm going to also disclaimer from a mystical lens of my perspective, DID again is not fragmentation of the soul. It is protection of our essence. Across cultures, dissociation has been recognized as a human capacity, one that becomes disorganizing only when it's unsupported, uncontained, and unsafe. In shamanic traditions, dissociative experiences were actually met with guidance and meaning. In trauma contexts, they were met with silence or danger. Same nervous system capacity, radically different outcomes, okay? So then it's all about nurturing and not retrieval. It is about re-invitation. So food for thought for all of this, guys, okay? So I've been talking really fast, and I literally just sped through my notes for you guys. There's so much more psychoeducation out there, and I would implore you to do deeper homework on that. And again, there should not be a stigma to dissociative identity disorder. In fact, when I work with individuals that have DID, I try to celebrate it, because how amazing it is that our psyche, our internal world, created these badass parts to come together to help overcome atrocities and experiences that would absolutely wreck the fiber of so much, you know? And so it's not about getting rid of these parts, it's about harmonizing them. And really it's about understanding that, hey, this was a way of survival, and now we have to honor and thank those parts that got us through that. So before we close, I do want to offer a little short grounding. So this is not going to be trauma processing, and it's not memory work. It is simply just an invitation to acknowledge the adaptations within you that have helped you survive. So regardless if you have DID or not, it's just a way for you to tap in, okay? So we're going to tap, and I want you to just tap above your heart. And if you feel called to move to tap elsewhere, then you can tap on the top of your head. You can tap where your temple is. You can tap under the eye, under the nose, under the lip, on your collarbone. Tap wherever you feel called in those positions. Those are meridian points within the body. Tap anywhere as you listen, okay? So I just want you to begin to tap. And I want you to remember, you are not broken. You have a deep, deep, intelligent system. And now you're working on harmonizing within the psyche, helping reprogram echo markers, allowing resonance from that deep center of your being. Just tap. Just harmonize those parts together. I'd like us to remember, people with DID are not broken. They are brilliant, brilliant survivors of impossible circumstances. Their systems tell a story of intelligence, love, and resilience written into the nervous system itself. And that should be treasured and honored. If this episode resonated with you in any way, I want you to know this. You are not alone. You are not too much. And your system has carried you farther than you may even realize. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And I hope that you are so proud of yourselves. Thank you for joining me today on the LCMHC Mystic Musings. And if this musing resonated, please follow the podcast wherever you listen. And you can always connect with me at merkabasacredhealing.com or on my social medias at the LCMHC Mystic. Such a deep gratitude to all who support this work and help this sacred corner reach a wider circle. Such big, big love.